consciousness, and since that time, the movement has grown. Of course, when Prabhupada first registered to that society, the founding members actually had no idea of the future of that movement, whether it would last for 1 year, or 2 years, or 5 years, or whatever. And they just put their names on this document and Prabhupada submitted it. But by the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Krishna and the efforts of Srila Prabhupada, that movement has grown immensely beyond anybody's expectations. If a movement can survive 20 years, and a spiritual movement can survive 20 years, that is considered to be quite good. After a movement is started and then the original founder disappears, usually the movement goes through difficulties and it may not last 20 years or whatever. And you can trace out the history of many movements, spiritual movements that have begun in the past 50 years or so, or even before that, and you'll see that not many of them are around anymore in the present day. If one movement can continue for 20 years is considered to be quite good, and if it can go for 50 years, that is quite remarkable. Most movements don't get to the 50th year, what to speak of going beyond that. But Prabhupada had even a greater vision than that. Prabhupada wanted the movement to go on for 10,000 years or so. So he was very ambitious about this movement. So, of course, we see that Prabhupada struggled in the very beginning. He struggled in India for many years, and he was discouraged by everybody. Nobody wanted to give anything, hardly, and nobody wanted to support. We see he tried to establish a society in Jhansi and make a movement there. That fell through. He was struggling to produce Back to Godhead magazine on his own. He was writing and proofing and publishing and distributing all by himself. Didn't go too far either. He asked different people for support. Nobody gave support. And then finally he decided, I'll try in America. And even for 1 year in America, he went here and there and tried. Nothing really happened. But we see that ultimately through that great endeavor in Prabhupada's life, that something did happen. But he had very big visions for this movement. And we know that a good movement requires great vision. And Prabhupada had that already. When people asked him in the beginning, one man asked him, who are you? What is this? He said, well, I have temples all around the world. But it's all the future. There were nothing, no temple was there at all, and he said this. And later on, of course, when he established the movement and began spreading, then he was very happy and proud that it was doing so. But he also understood the dangers involved in making a movement, keeping it together, and preserving it. There, of course, is the experience of the past. We know the history of the Gaudiya Sampradaya in general. We know the history of the Gaudiya Math and how it fell apart after Srila Bhakti Saraswati's Thakur's demise. After about 10 years or so, it began gradually fading away in spite of the great efforts that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had made to establish that movement around India. So Prabhupada was very aware of the dangers because of the experience he had had. And therefore he made some provisions. So of course he made a society, registered the society, and later on he decided that the future of the movement would not be in the hands of one person. Generally, spiritual societies appoint one person as a head. And of course that is the general tendency in the Gaudiya Sampradaya. A guru appoints one disciple and he becomes the head of that particular group or whatever like that. So have the governing body commissioner. So that was one thing he did to help preserve the movement, following the order of Bhakti Saraswati Thakur. However, there's always danger no matter what we put in charge, whether it's one person or you put a group of persons in charge. As we go into the future, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years after the departure of the founder, we get more and more distant from the founder until the only people there left are people who never met Prabhupada at all. So at the present time, we do have people that actually met Prabhupada. Maybe the number is few. Maybe it's, I don't know, a few hundred maybe now, a few hundred. And after 20 years, that's not going to be there anymore. There'll be no one who actually had direct contact with Prabhupada at all. But those persons had contact with persons who had contact with Prabhupada. So we got some contact there. But what about the next generation? They don't even have contact with the people who met Prabhupada. They have contact with somebody who met somebody who met somebody else. So as we go into the future, it becomes more and more the relationship with Prabhupada and his ideas becomes more and more distant as we go into the future, generation after generation, 20 years after 20 years after 20 years. So we go 200 years in the future, it'll be like 6 or 7 generations later. What remains of Prabhupada's influence? So this is a very great concern at the moment in the GBC, how to keep the movement going into the future. Of course we can go into the future, but are we going into the future with Prabhupada's ideas of what Iskcon should be? What are his essential ideas? What was essential inspiration, etc.? So we have to try to understand how to continue the great inspiration that Prabhupada gave to the movement when he started it as one single person with no money and expanded it around the world, and then preserve it with the same principles that Prabhupada had, so that we don't go into another direction. We see that the Gaudiya Sampradaya itself, even though it was founded by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who was an avatar of the Supreme Lord and is also directly Krishna, after a few hundred years we get all sorts of little movements coming off who, in terms of their philosophy and their conduct, were quite different from Lord Chaitanya. And then they say, oh, we're following Lord Chaitanya. So the same can happen for Iskcon in the future. Of course, we already got some offshoots coming out in different ways, but we can get more offshoots, and then we can get different philosophies, different modes of conduct. So many things can happen in the future as we get further and further away, generation after generation after generation. So, somehow or other, we do have to preserve what Prabhupada established, and preserve that spirit, and preserve the ideals that Prabhupada wanted this movement to convey as a movement to the world. So we have to, of course, carefully study the works of Srila Prabhupada, the words of Srila Prabhupada, everything about Srila Prabhupada. And, of course, the GBC is trying to do that in our strategic planning. And find means of preserving those messages and those ideals and carry them into the future somehow or other. So that's the big effort that we have to do. Now the GBC is one body, they can do that to some degree, but they also require the support of the whole body of devotees within Iskcon to somehow cooperate with this endeavor to preserve the movement of Iskcon into the future as Prabhupada envisioned it. So this is the 50th anniversary, and somehow or other we've come this far. So now we're into the second generation, so to speak, of devotees. We have the first generation and the second generation coexisting. But then soon, it's only going to be second generation, third generation. And then it'll be third generation, fourth generation, and fourth and fifth generation as we go on in the future. So we have to be aware of our own position here and try to do the utmost to carry on this movement into the future. So the first generation, second generation have come to the point of 50 years. But then second generation, third generation, fourth generation, they have to continue another 50 years. So there's going to be challenges. All sorts of things are going to happen. So everyone has to be prepared for the challenges somehow or other. So everyone has to, at the present moment, with this 50th year anniversary, every devotee should be aware that they also have a role to play for the future, and somehow, with whatever ability they have, to convey to the people around them and to the people who will be there in the future, in the next few years, as much as they can, the understanding of Prabhupada's mission and how to keep it together. One of Prabhupada's main concerns, of course, is he wanted a unified Iskcon, not many Iskcons or many different groups. He wanted everyone to stay in Iskcon, so he wanted one movement with all devotees within it, not outside the movement, etc. So somehow or other, we have to make an endeavor in that way to accommodate people, even if there are differences. So we have the slogan, unity and diversity, etc. But then again, there is a limit on how diverse we can get before we say goodbye and start our own movement or whatever like that. So we do have to set limits, but we try to be adaptable and flexible to encompass as many devotees as we can, even though their ideas may be slightly different or whatever. So we have to have unity. That is one thing. But then we can just say unity of Iskcon, but then within Iskcon we can also have little movements, little groups, etc. That's another big danger for Iskcon. And one of the causes or the inspiration, we can say, for having little groups is that we have not one guru, but many gurus. And then each group of devotees has loyalty to one guru within Iskcon, so we get different groups within Iskcon. This can also be a cause of disunity. We can say Iskcon name, we can be all the Iskcon, at the same time we belong to a different group within Iskcon. So if that identity with the individual guru becomes very strong, that's also a great danger to the unity of Iskcon, because we're technically one body, but then we have these identities within Iskcon. I belong to this group, you belong to that group, like this. It's also a danger, and it becomes very unhealthy unless we have a sense of real unity in another way. So, of course, one of the ways in which we can create unity is to have a stress on the loyalty to Prabhupada and his vision, and that the loyalty to Prabhupada is greater than the loyalty to any individual guru. So that is one emphasis the GBC is making, to somehow establish the position of Prabhupada and the loyalty of all Iskcon devotees to Prabhupada, in spite of the fact that they have some loyalty to the guru. So there should be no, competition there. Loyalty here, loyalty there. Ultimately, the loyalty should be to Srila Prabhupada. So if everyone is loyal to Srila Prabhupada, we still have unity. But if we have greater loyalty to some particular individual, then that can create problems within Iskcon. So we've actually written several papers, one paper on this, and established different methods of trying to convey this to the population of Iskcon, that is parallel lines of authority, which is now mandatory for all people all devotees taking initiation. So they understand something about the guru, the loyalty to the guru and the loyalty to Iskcon, and they can balance that out nicely. And that's one thing. Another is the disciple course, a course for disciples to educate them in the proper way, like that. So these are some of the methods we're using to go into the future and prevent divisions within Iskcon or break away from Iskcon itself. So, in this way we have to think of many things that we as individuals can also do to help the unity of Iskcon. Of course, one is by supporting the present endeavors like encouraging the disciple course among individuals, etc., reading the paper parallel lines of authority, and also acting on that basis. And in the future, also the GBC will probably come up with other articles and other means by which we can try to keep the unity in Iskcon. So these are attempts by the GBC to project Iskcon into the future. We've got 50 years, but we have to go on further and further and further. And as we get more and more distant from Srila Prabhupada, we really have to keep that in mind. Somehow or other we have to preserve that unity. So each individual has a role to play, because Iskcon is not an abstraction, it's made up of devotees. So it depends on the individual devotees, what their consciousness is. So if we have the right consciousness, definitely we can convey that to another person. As I said this morning in the Bhagavatam class, that association is a very important factor. So if we have a good sense of Srila Prabhupada's mission, the importance of Iskcon, and the unity of Iskcon, we can, through our association, we can convey this to other people, other devotees, and this will be very beneficial for everyone. So therefore, every devotee should actually make it their individual effort to have a very clear idea of Prabhupada's goals and try to keep Iskcon as one unified entity with cooperative individuals. And I'm certain that everyone can do that since everyone is sincere devotee. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare.
Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Krishnaya Bhutale Shumate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityanamane Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshtarine Jayasi Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Gauri Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Krishnaya Bhutale Shumate Hare Krishna.
Hare.
His Holiness Bhanu Swami Maharaj has very wonderfully brought out a perspective on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of Iskcon. He has, in a very short speech, given some very important detail about the responsibility we have in being members of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, in being followers of Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. It is very necessary for us, like he mentioned, to look back 51 years back. Prabhupada set sail to America, and he took up a very massive responsibility. At that time he was the only person shouldering it. And it's mentioned that he even went to several places, especially the Advaita Bhavan, Advaita Acharya's place in Shantipur. And it's mentioned that he prayed, he even cried and chanted Hare Krishna. And he mentioned that this is such a heavy responsibility that I have got to do, to go to the Western world and preach and start this movement. So it's a big responsibility. In fact, it is unprecedented that pure devotion of the Lord will be preached to his movement all over the world. Previously, there was not much of a necessity for this because Varnashrama institution was prevailing and Vedic society was prevailing, even in its disguised form, even in its not very efficient form. But then in Kali Yuga, when everything is a mess, it's very necessary to start a movement. And Prabhupada in his later days even said that we should establish Varnashrama. In other words, an institution is so much required to propagate pure bhakti. Krishna himself propagated and instituted Varnashrama. Chaturvarnyam maya srishnam gunakarma vibhagasha. In order that people will gradually go up and understand pure bhakti. So this institution is not just an ordinary institution. It is an institution meant to send people back to Godhead after making them pure devotees. It's a whole lot of work. It's a whole institution meant for sending people back to Godhead. And if you think about it, sometimes when you think seriously about it, it's a big job. Each one of the people have to go back to Godhead through this movement. It's an amazing movement. And you may not, the way Lord Chaitanya's whole mercy is working through this movement and the way all the previous acharyas have designed it, thought about it and worked on it, is that it is meant for anybody, everybody, in any shape, any size, any karma, any situation that he is in. If he takes up the chanting of the holy name, he can purify himself. If he does it sincerely, he can go back to Godhead. And this movement is sending people back to Godhead even now. Many devotees are passing away. They are chanting Hare Krishna. They have devotees around them chanting Hare Krishna. And many of them are very convinced that this person is sure going back to Godhead because he chanted Hare Krishna as per the instructions of Lord Chaitanya, as per the instructions of Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, as per Prabhupada's instructions and the previous Acharya's instructions. So sending people back to Godhead is a great job. We're not sending people like in India. You have companies that send people to America, to Asia, some other place here, there. You become qualified, they teach you how to get a visa, how to prepare you for an interview, do that, this, everything, and send you to that place. But this is about sending people back to Godhead. And a worldwide movement for that. This was contemplated by the 6 Goswamis, Vishwa Vaishnava Rajya Sabha, a whole world confluence and a society of Vaishnavas from all over the world. A society was contemplated by the Goswamis, and then Bhakti Vinod Thakur tried to bring that into force. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur went ahead and started that movement, and he established all over India, and he left it to his disciple Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada to actually go all over the world and preach. And what Prabhupada did and instituted this movement is predicted that he would do this. And when Prabhupada was asked, why do you have to do this? Lord Chaitanya is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He himself could have done this very easily. Why we have to go through all this trouble? Prabhupada turned around, dug his stick into the ground and said, because he wanted me to do it. And it was a mission that Prabhupada knew that he had to do, and he had to institute and carefully craft it with all the subtle things that are required, small, minute details that are required. And he did a very, very extensive work. Instituting the GBC, as Maharaj was saying, and making rules and regulations for the society's members, making it easy for anybody from any walk of life to follow these, and if he does it sincerely, to give him a path back to Godhead. So this movement is not at all an ordinary movement. It is not just teaching people asanas and yoga. It is not giving charity. It's not building hospitals. It's not doing all those things alone. It's aiming, Om Tat Vishnu Paramam Padam Sada Pashyanti Surayaha Diviga Chakshura Tatam. This is the aim, sending people back to God. It's a very lofty aim. And Prabhupada has crafted the society for that. Sending people back to God. And it is happening. We may not be very conscious of it because we are inside it from day to day, looking at many things, affairs, projects, issues and everything. But it's an amazing moment. So that's why 50 years is important, because we need to look back. Lokanath Maharaj was telling us that this is what a lion does. A lion walks, trots, leaps, and then after some time it keeps looking backside. He called it Simhavalokana. Looking back, how much far I've come, who is following me, what's happening. The lion walks and keeps looking back. And he said that in Iskcon, it's 50 years, we've got to look back and see where we are, where we need to go ahead. Look back, look front. So that's an important junction in the whole history of Iskcon, which is already past and yet to come. Like Maharaj mentioned, 10,000 years this movement will last, Prabhupada had mentioned. And it's also mentioned in the scriptures in Brahma Bible, the Purana and other places, that this group of people who raise their hands and have Urdhva Pundraka, vertical tilak on their heads, will sing the name of Krishna and conquer the world. So this is Prabhupada's movement. We know it is going to be successful, but we should not sit pretty on our success, thinking that anyway it's going to be a successful movement, I can rest. Prabhupada did a lot of work, although he knew that it's going to be successful, and he depended completely on Krishna. So we need to contribute to Prabhupada's movement, like Maharaj said, with maturity, with deep understanding of the challenges in front of us. It's not at all an easy thing to run a spiritual movement inside the material world. And there is going to be many problems. And people always ask these questions to us, especially those who are newcomers and who are struggling to be within the movement, within all the different challenges. You know, they come and ask us, I came here thinking that in the outside world there are so many problems, and in Iskcon it will be very smooth sailing, and little did I know I had to face so many difficulties. But nobody in this world has been without difficulties. Even the Pandavas had their wife disrobed in the open palace, and they were sent to the forest, and Krishna was riding the planet next to them at that time. And all these things happened. Luckily, nothing like that has happened yet in Iskcon. It's doing much, much better. And within 50 years, we've come a long way. Like Maharaj was mentioning, other religious movements, they didn't take off to this extent in 50 years. We look at the Christian history. As soon as Jesus was crucified, it went underground. And it's after 400 years it was reinstituted again. Though there was some sporadic here and there, preaching going on secretly. So for 50 years, we've come a long way. And for some critics who say that, oh, after Prabhupada nothing happened, this happened, that happened, I say that Prabhupada would be very happy. There were 625 plus centers that Iskcon has all over the world today. And Iskcon is not an ordinary movement that is simply doing some religious, ritualistic activity. We're actually giving a solution for people in this world, for personally for them, socially in society, and for the world at large, and showing them how to move ahead. And Prabhupada's teachings, his books have got solutions to everything under the sun. Speak about the environment, and Prabhupada has given solutions. And we have modeled 65 eco-villages, showing or making a movement towards becoming completely sustainable, self-sustainable, and speak about philosophy, answering any type of question. All these things are amazing contributions to human society that Prabhupada's movement has done. He has written in his books, he has given us the movement, deity worship, Harinam Sankirtan, association of devotees, name it. There is everything that is provided for any individual to very happily survive and go back to Godhead. So this is an amazing package, and we should not take that lightly. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada's books carry all the instructions that are required for us, and it's our duty to actually promote it and help Srila Prabhupada. He kindly help me. These words keep ringing me in my ears in his famous talk in Los Angeles. Kindly help me. Please publish and distribute these books in as many languages as possible, and the Krishna consciousness movement will automatically spread all over the world. These are all powerful Mahavakya instructions from our founder, and we should take these things very seriously. And it's our duty to stay within the society that Prabhupada has created. He asks us to stay within Iskcon under any situation and circumstance and cooperate and perform all the activities as per his directions, and success will always be there. So the great challenge that we have is many things have changed in the world outside since 50 years. There's been a big change in the people outside. And Iskcon sometimes needs to even change its outreach, shift gears, and how to deal with different type of people. And Prabhupada did that. When he came, he was amazingly unique in the way he presented pure Bhakti, Krishna consciousness to people in the worst place in the world. And he succeeded in doing that. And he said that he knew how to do that by empowerment that he had. And his godbrothers somehow lacked that type of an empowerment. And although he wanted to have all their cooperation and he wanted to jointly perform with them, they were not willing to. And in this way he was forced to do that on his own. So it's a great challenge for us in the changing face of society to keep the core principles in place, but at the same time shift gears so that we do our outreach effectively to the changing audience that we have, especially youngsters these days. In India, for instance, 55% of the population is below 25 years old. We really need to think about how to preach and get to the youngsters. According to the demographics that's changing so fast, we need to also present Krishna consciousness, because Krishna consciousness is so vast and affords itself to be presented in many different venues in many different ways, so that our impact is powerful. And when people move inside after the impact, we can introduce them to the core principles gradually and make sure that our core principles are not compromised while we are changing our impact strategy. At the same time, we should also know that we are increasingly a pluralistic society, a society that is so many different types of diversities. And Iskcon has to deal with a massive diversity all over the world. The whole world people are trying to take up the challenge of globalization. And in globalization they are trying to face a solid challenge, because in different places they go, there are different cultures. How to make their business prosper in any particular place in the face of that particular culture is a challenging thing for them. But Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada was able to float Krishna consciousness all over the world in spite of the varied diversity and get people united. That's a very powerful achievement. Whole world is struggling with how to globalize and how to face a challenge of culture. In fact, what they're trying to do is homogenize all cultures. They're destroying all the cultures and making money, economy, the main culture. But Prabhupada had Krishna conscious culture everywhere. And he asked people to fall in line with that culture. And he taught them how to do it, and they found it easy to do it. So our challenge is that we can retain our cultural diversity and still have unity on the basis of Krishna consciousness. And that's what Prabhupada asks us to do. And we're trying to do that all over the world. That's another challenge that we have. Sometimes we have great diversity in our own thinking, thought leaders within our society as to how to understand the instructions of Prabhupada according to time, place and circumstance. And all different versions seem perfectly true and applicable. And sometimes we have to strike a balance between how to unitedly apply diverse thoughts which are all relevant. So this way we have many challenges inside and outside. But if we simply chant Hare Krishna sincerely, read Prabhupada's books and get inspired by the life and teachings of Prabhupada, many things can happen, and we will get the clear path and instruction on how we should move forward. Srila Prabhupada preserved the original culture of Krishna consciousness, and he was able to preach Krishna consciousness in a wonderful, diverse way to attract many different individuals. When he was told that he has to learn how to adopt some different culture in the Western world, how to eat with fork and knife and spoon, and how to do this and that, he commented that, I have not come here to learn their way of living and doing things. I have come to teach them what is the Vedic way and the Vedic culture of doing things. I have come to change them, not to get changed in the process. In this way, Prabhupada stuck to the principles of Krishna consciousness, and he was a wonderful example in modern times of how to preach pure bhakti to anybody and everybody in this world based on Lord Chaitanya's wonderful philosophy. So we have a very challenging and exciting movement and a whole opportunity ahead of us. And like Prabhupada said, he asks us to tax our brains on how to present Krishna consciousness to people according to time, place and circumstance. So it's a great challenge, and it's an exciting assignment for anybody who's willing to take the challenge to take up Krishna consciousness, preaching, expanding the movement for the pleasure of Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and everybody in the Parampara. They will all be very pleased to see how a wonderful temple has been built here in a Muslim country, and Prabhupada desired it, and because of the devotees sincerely following the instructions of Prabhupada, the temple has manifested itself. And there are beautiful, wonderful leaders here like Simeshwar Prabhu and many others who have got a wonderful vision and are seeped deeply inside Prabhupada's understanding of Krishna consciousness and his vision. So we are very thankful to all of you on this very historical moment of the 50th anniversary of Iskcon, that we are able to discuss this and move forward in Krishna consciousness, expanding the movement unlimitedly like Prabhupada wanted. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada ki.
Hare Krishna. So next we'll open for questions. So anyone have questions, you can raise the question. And one more thing, sorry that we could not have so Manichinger. Tamil நம்ம translate பண்ண முடிய போச்சு, even Chinese, because a very short time. And அடுத்த செமினா போனோம், அதனால தான் நம்ம தமிழ் மொழியில இருந்து நம்ம translate பண்ணல, மன்னிச்சுக்கங்க. கேள்வி இருந்தா தமிழ்ல இருந்தா நீங்க கேட்கலாம், தமிழ்ல கேட்கலாம், நம்ம மகாராஷ்டிரா ஆங்கிலத்துல சொல்லலாம். Okay, so we open questions now in both Chinese also can, Chinese English with them. How long, Prabhu? 10 minutes, 10 நிமிஷம் கேள்வி கேட்கலாம்.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, my question might be a bit sensitive. So, Bhanu Maharaj was saying that we are, because of great unity within Iskcon, our main focus, we must focus on His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Bejendra Swami Prabhupada. So I see that some similarity with Ritvik kind of focus. They are also focusing on His Divine Grace Bhakti Bejendra Prabhupada. So my question is, in the future, can we merge together or work? Is there any possibility of we merging together or working together with Ritvik?
We don't have any objection to putting Prabhupada in the center of the movement and emphasizing the respect and worship to Srila Prabhupada. In fact, we encourage that. The difference with the Ritvik philosophy is you take Diksha from Prabhupada directly, even though he's not there, through a tape recording or whatever, and you select a name by computer or whatever. So-and-so Das or whatever, I don't know how they select the name, they keep changing the name. So that's the objection we have. And over the last several years, there have been several attempts to discuss, and we've had meetings, the GBC and members of the Iskcon Indian Bureau have met with Madhupanda on several occasions to try to come up with some sort of thing, but there's always that point that that's the difference, that Prabhupada is the Diksha Guru for everyone. So that's which we don't agree with that part. But as for putting Prabhupada in the center and making Prabhupada the object of worship, main object of worship, no, we agree with that completely.
Yeah, Maharaj, I'd like to ask about the books. You were speaking about Srila Prabhupada's books being central in our society.
Yeah.
But we do see books by other people coming. I'm talking particularly about Prabhupada's godbrothers and disciples of his godbrothers, and their books also get some interest from devotees. So, do we allow? What is our attitude towards these books?
I don't think we have any particular rule as such. If I put up by the GBC, you cannot read any book from outside because obviously people are individuals, etc. I think the principle, however, is that if any book criticizes or creates disunity within Iskcon by criticizing Prabhupada or Iskcon movement or something, obviously we should not read those books or distribute those books within Iskcon. If it's simply a philosophy book or a theology book which is in agreement with the Lord Chaitanya's teachings, I don't think there's any objection to that. But as far as making statements about Prabhupada or Iskcon or whatever like that, derogatory remarks or whatever, that we should not encourage.
But we can repair, we can quote them, we can take statements from these books and use them if we're lecturing in Iskcon.
I suppose you could, but you could probably find an equally good quote in Prabhupada's books if you looked, I would think. So better for inspiring devotees in Iskcon if you quote from Prabhupada's books than you quote from outside books.
தமிழ்ல கூட கேட்கலாம், தமிழ் கேள்வின்னா கூட கேட்கலாம்.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. It was a very inspiring and instructive lecture he gave this morning, and he emphasized on the association and touched on Bhakti. And he also said about practicing Bhakti. It is a very sad thing in my experience that we find it very difficult to maintain the quality of Krishna consciousness due to the lack of actually reading Prabhupada's books. And as you have mentioned, if you want to perform any service, you must have that knowledge so that it could be done properly and correctly. And the mistakes can be avoided when this knowledge is there. So many devotees are really putting their heart into it, to do a lot of service, dedicated, sacrificing. But there are a pinprick somewhere in the lodge that this one lack of really reading Prabhupada's books and understanding the mood of Prabhupada in the essence of cooperation, especially devotees in the movement some 25-30 years. And even we find when it comes to philosophical explanation or giving classes or conducting seminars and things like that, we always have to depend on someone outside of Malaysia. So how we can create a system whereby we also need to conduct the same thing and set example for the others as others are doing for us. So how could you help us to get this message much more deeper and work on it? Thank you, Maharaj.
Well, I think you have a national meeting every year, is it? Among all the leaders of the different centers from North and South and Central, whatever. So I think one of the topics there can be education of devotees and how to do that. Now I know in KL they do have courses for Bhakti Shastri, I think, and other things they're doing already. But I think throughout Malaysia and all the centers in the different places, maybe they have to concentrate on educating the devotees within the Bhakti Vrikshas, etc., etc. So I think in your national meeting you can probably discuss some, come up with a plan for education, at least the minimum educational standards for leaders of Bhakti Vrikshas and for temple presidents and whatever within Malaysia. You can have a minimum standard and also a means to come to that standard. How are they going to get there? So we have an educational system. We set the standards and make a system so that they can come up to that standard. It shouldn't be so difficult.
I think we can have one more question. 5 minutes more. ஆங்கிலுக்கு தமிழுக்கு கேட்கலாம். இன்னும் 5 நிமிஷம். அடுத்தது we going to start our next seminar.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Just a question on, because we want to preserve this movement to 10,000 years, but we see gradually there's kind of like cultural deviation. So are we going to, is there any areas we're dealing on that part? Like you see nowadays the dress code is being slowly, gradually declining, and then the hairstyle is going different ways, and devotees started to have beard in different style, and the haircuts going gradually different angle and all that. So is that part of the 50 years to 10,000 years plan is there or not for this kind of things? Hare Krishna.
Maharaj asked me to comment before he speaks on it. I think if you look at the old pictures of Prabhupada's preaching in the West, and you see the dresses that people wear, you will find that it's much more varied. It looks like a fancy dress competition or something. It's not the main thing. Of course, when we want to represent as an institution, we want to have some uniform, we want to have some homogeneous, look and everything like that for helping the institution. But as far as bhakti, it grows whether we have a beard or not. We have hair, shabby hair or not, grows. But personal cleanliness, Vaishnava attire, all this is going to help your sadhana too. In that sense, it's okay. But we do have members who are very senior, very advanced, and may need to be in a secular world outside in their profession, and who are also great preachers. And they may not fall in line with your uniform because that's not the type of thing that they can do. They can be utilized better elsewise. It doesn't mean that everybody has to become a full-time devotee, shaved head and don a saffron cloth or a tilak and this thing. But if you can do it in your area and people don't comment about it and they accept it, fine, do it. But we have to see situations, times, circumstances and do things accordingly.
Okay, Hare Krishna. One more question? Okay, Mataji. I hope this is the last question.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I have a question here. So we have different type of people who comes from different walk of life. When we see Krishna is all attractive, so people like to see Krishna. And then when they hear to some classes which is very high philosophy, which only devotees can understand, they get bewildered and then they think we have different philosophy. So from my personal experience, because I've invited some people to temple, so when they hear to our classes, when we actually talk about others' faith, when we comment, they misunderstand it because I don't know how to explain, but before they fall in love with Krishna, just because of the classes that they misunderstand, they stop coming. So how we want to make this, to prevent this, because some classes we have to give it in a way to make them understand. Some people can accept Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There's a way to put it into words. I have explained to my friend that Krishna is the Supreme. We pray to Krishna, it means we have prayed to everyone. They can accept it. But sometimes when we give class and tell them that we have a higher taste than others, they get offended. So how are we going to, in our classes, attract people and slowly make them understand that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead? We cannot go straight to the point, they don't get it. This is one of my questions, because when people come to our temple, they are attracted to Krishna, and then they want to actually, there are chances for them to come to Krishna consciousness, but just because we told them very briefly and we don't really explain, they don't get the philosophy.
Well, there's different ways of preaching to different types of people. A person who has complete faith, then we can speak to that person. A person who is just beginning, obviously we cannot speak the same things. Now, in the Sunday feast, it's a little bit difficult to preach because we have a mixed audience there. Some are devotees who accept everything, know Bhagavad Gita, and then there are others who may be beginners. So that's one difficulty we have if we're going to preach to that audience. How to preach to both audiences simultaneously, a little bit difficult. So, of course, one method solution is to divide, have one class for people that know everything, another class for beginners, if we have enough people who are just introduced to, are coming to the temple for the first time or the second time or whatever. So that's one way we can do. The other, of course, is to, in public speaking in general, even for devotees, we don't really criticize others so much as we try to explain very intelligently the highest concept of God, which automatically will leave other religions or philosophies far behind, simply because of its completeness. That's all. So we don't have to criticize others so much as we emphasize the plus points of Krishna consciousness.
Just make a point. I'm giving a seminar on this. It's on effective outreach, how to bring the harvest home. So I cover some of these things on there, just in case.
One more.
Hare Krishna to all the Maharaj. I just want to ask you one question where I'm not initiated, but is it really important where when I die, can't I reach Krishna without initiation? Thank you.
So the important point is whether you know Krishna or not. That may or may not depend on initiation. It depends on your faith, it depends on your practice, it depends on how you chant Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Okay, Hare Krishna, I think we have to stop here. So I'd like to thank His Holiness Bhanu Maharaj and His Holiness Bhakti Swami Maharaj for this plenary session. We'll have one more tomorrow.